Hi and welcome to my name is Amy Bryant of Wild Child Counseling here in Atlanta, Georgia, and Parenting Beyond Punishment, which is an online support and education community on Facebook. And I am here today with Sarah MacLaughlin, and we are really excited to be talking about emotional intelligence. Sarah is an author and writer and a licensed social worker. And I became acquainted with her both through her writing, What Not to Say, Tools for Talking with Young Children, and also through Facebook on her professional page. And I feel so aligned with her. And she helps parents reduce stress and enjoy their kids. She's a mom to a young son, and she says that he gives her plenty of opportunities to take her own advice. And I can totally relate to that. So, Sarah, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Amy. I'm just delighted to be here with you.
I am delighted that you're here. So, one of the main ways that we help our children increase their emotional regulation and self-regulation is through modeling, and we know this. Um, Sometimes this is more difficult than it sounds. Speaking from my own personal experience. So what are some ways that we as parents can get better at this?
Well, practice, practice, practice. I like to say it's, in terms of modeling, that it's the good news and the bad news that our kids are always watching us, because it's such an amazing opportunity to walk the walk and talk the talk that we want our kids to be able to follow our lead, right? We want to be good leaders in this area. But where it gets tricky is that we didn't maybe have the best models ourselves if we were raised with a more authoritarian model that was, do as I say, and that was more fear-based. And I knew when my parents were getting towards the edge of frustrated and I fall prey to it myself, where I'll be like, I'm starting to get really mad. And then I'm like, me getting mad isn't necessarily a reason for my child to change his behavior. Yes, it's important for him to be able to read other people and know when their boundaries are being pushed. But I know that if I want to teach him something, I have to be in a regulated state. And that is such the rub, is that to be able to convey something that you want somebody to hear and understand, you have to be calm and regulated so that you're heard. Because the more escalated you are, the less tuned into your words, and the more tuned into your emotional state another person is. I just got a battery warning. You go ahead.
Okay. I love that you said that just because we feel anger doesn't mean that our children should have to change their behavior.
Right.
Because sometimes people might get angry by the things we do, but that doesn't mean we should stop doing them.
Right, exactly. Because that's what we teach kids when we do that. And I have to catch myself because I'm prone to doing it. And I was just talking with a colleague recently that it's really easy when somebody else, I'm so sorry for the jostling. I'm all set now.
It's okay. It happens.
I was like, oh, I didn't plug in my computer and now it's going to run out of battery. But it's really easy when someone else, and especially if that someone else is a small person who is learning so much, they learn so much in the first 3 years of life. Their brains develop at this crazy fast rate, 1 million connections per second, which is crazy research that just came out. And then so much more learning has to happen before they're fully developed brains and fully grown adults, that it's easy to see their emotional upset and offload and expression as unreasonable, right? It seems unreasonable because oftentimes young children are upset about things that maybe aren't important to us, but are important to them. But then if we feel upset, I mean, I know this for myself. When I feel upset, I feel completely justified in my feelings.
Of course.
Right? So if I'm triggered or ignited or escalated, or my husband used the word heated, because, you do have those feelings that this is what's helped me become more emotionally intelligent. Or I love Gabor Mate's term, emotionally competent, because it kind of infers that there's some skill involved in learning how to work through your feelings. But what's really helped me is to tune into the sensory, physiological sensations in my body. And so what happens when we get upset or angry is that we do get ignited or heated or flushed.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's different. You know, for some people, they get tight, their breathing gets short. I mean, their feet tingle. Who knows? I'm sure people have
Right.
all kinds of different ways of experiencing their emotions. But that has been my sort of mindfulness red flag to tune into, like, I'm starting to lose my prefrontal cortex and my ability to stay calm and regulated so that I can help my child learn to be calm and regulated, so that I pause, so that I do take a breath, so that I do slow things down. Or I recently shared with a colleague, if you're standing, sit. If you're sitting, lie down. Like, just get yourself lower, sunk into, instead of like blah, 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 spun up into your
Yes.
head, because then I'm not able to teach or guide.
Mm-hmm. It's true. And for me, I've had the same experience, Sarah, that when I'm able to notice my physical sensations, um, it helps me know that that wall is coming, right? That I'm about to get to the end of my rope, and I want to tie the knot before I get to the end, right?
Yes,
So,
yes, good analogy.
so noticing when my jaw gets tight or my chest gets heavy or my sometimes my ears feel clogged, like
Yeah,
strange
that's so
sensations,
wild.
right? And then I go, wait, I can't hear anything. Oh, I'm getting to my end. I'm at
Starting to
my end.
go.
This is a sticky place for me. Let me get, and I do. I tend to sit on the ground, or I walk slowly, or I
Yeah.
take a really slow exhale, or I go outside and say, I've got to move. I've got to move.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and anything that we can do when we're in those states to narrate or externalize our process is also such great modeling. That, I mean, because I grew up, as most people my age and a lot of people even younger than me, with more authoritarian parents than I am offering, more authoritarian parenting than I am offering. Um, I I lost my train of thought. Darn it. Oh shoot.
It happens.
I know.
I
Darn it.
Well, I was raised
It
with
will come
much
back
more
to me.
authoritarian parents as well, and I feel like becoming aware of my body space is really not something that happened until I became a parent.
Right. Yes.
And you know what I found happens is my emotional competence, to use that word, so I'm going to start
That
using that
word. Yeah, it's a good one.
word, has increased, and it increases right along with my daughters, and actually my daughter has maybe
Right. They outpace us.
surpassed me. Yeah.
Right. They've had better guidance. Okay, so I remember what I was going to say. So it was about externalizing your process, because my parents got reached the end of their rope, and then that was it. Sort of like the wall came down, and it's time to just like snap to and do what you're told.
Right.
And so when I reach those places where I want to do that and I consciously don't do that,
Yeah.
what I end up having to do is say, I don't know what to do right now.
Oh my gosh, that's exactly what I
So I'm
do.
like, I don't know what to do right now, because the only couple things that are rolling around my head for what to do are things that A, I don't really want to do. B, I wrote a book saying not to do those things. So like I couldn't really live with myself. You put that out in the world and you're like, I'm kind of stuck. Like,
Right.
well, okay, so what am I going to do? But what always happens when I stop myself and even say that out loud and
Mhm.
not worry that that makes me a weak leader, or,
Right.
not in charge, or all of those worries I might have about saying I don't know what to do, like it's too
Yeah.
humbling or something.
Yes.
No, like parenting is hard and it's okay to not know what to do in a situation. I always come up with something that will work, right? That's an alternative. Like, I'll remember that I might want to engage in something playful and connecting for a couple minutes
Yeah.
before I try to steer, my kiddo in a direction, instead of like getting into that, locked power struggle where no one's going to win.
Yes. I am so glad to hear that you say that, because when at that, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do because I'm parenting beyond punishment, right? We
Right,
don't punish
right.
it, but
You
I want you to go to your room. I want you to do what I say because I said so. And then I go, okay,
wait.
that's not what I'm going to do. I know too much about brain development. And so I go, I just look at her and I go, I don't know what to do. I
Yeah,
feel frustrated and I'm going to sit here for a minute. And she's like,
right.
okay, you know,
Right, which is such great modeling, though, which I think once parents have permission to not know what to do every second, because it's impossible to know, right? And there's going to
yeah,
be quandaries along the way. And if you have more than one child, they're going to push your buttons or get you going in different ways. That it's okay to take a breather, and that actually is awesome modeling. If your child learns that, wow, if you're in a situation where you're flummoxed and emotionally heated and you don't know what to do, it's okay to stop and
yeah,
pause and say, time out. I don't know what to do right now. So I'm going to take a breath and connect with myself, trust myself that I'm going to figure something out. That's amazing modeling. That's
yeah.
amazing emotional intelligence and emotional competence, right? In action.
Right. We should all be stopping and pausing.
Yeah.
It feels much better too, although it is a little uncomfortable,
It's,
right?
yeah, it can be actually a lot uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And not knowing what to do in general can be a lot uncomfortable too, depending on how rigid your brain got built when you were younger, right? And
Right.
how it might feel really uncomfortable to be flexible in that way.
Right. So, for those of you listening, Sarah also writes for 0 to 3. And so she knows all about what she was just talking about, how your brain is developed from your brainstem up, which happens so much in those first, in utero, in those first 3 years,
So much.
right?
Yes. 1,000 brain connections per second.
It's
It's,
amazing.
I mean, a million. Sorry, it just got
A
upgraded from
million.
1,000 to a million.
And
No jump in between. It went from 1,000 per second to a million per second.
it's a little breathtaking.
It is. Yes. But it helps people understand toddlers, like any parents of toddlers out there, that it is the most busy time of brain development. Like a
Right.
3 to 3.5 year old's brain is the most active that it will ever be.
Wow.
And then there's a pruning process. So a 3.5 year old's brain is busier than a 2 year old's brain, a 6 year old brain's, a 35 year old's brain. It is under construction. And if you imagine like a construction site and how convoluted it can be and how the messages might get mixed along the way, it helps you understand why people come up with terms like three-nager or
Right.
terrible twos. Just that period of development is so rapid and so challenging for grown-ups.
Hmm.
Our brains are wired a lot differently than a 3-year-old's.
Right. And just trying to keep up physically and emotionally and mentally. It is, yeah. I remember when my daughter was younger, looking up at my friend and saying, I just want about an hour where I'm not having to guide her. I could just watch,
Yeah.
because there's so much going on.
Yeah. It's true. And there's not a lot of impulse control or self regulation. They're in
Right.
that period where I often say all self regulation for children under 3 is co regulation, right? Like they have to have a regulated, calm adult helping them through their flipped lids, as Dan Siegel would say, or, those busy emotional hijackings that they go through. They don't have the brain structure in place to bring themselves back. And
Right.
they really need us to support them in a way that is calm. And you can't fake calm.
No.
That's a friend of mine said that to me, and I was like, oh, that's what I've been trying to do.
Yeah.
I just was one of those like set my shoulders and grit my teeth and try to be cool. And
Yeah.
even if I wasn't, but then I learned about how much young children are tuned into your nonverbal signals, and I realized my nonverbal signals were stress and
Right.
heated and not calm. So then I was like, oh man, I have more work to do. I've
Right.
been working so hard, but there's more work to do to be able to actually get calm in the face of a kid who might scream for 20 minutes.
Right.
That's
And it's
hard.
hard.
It's
It
really
is.
hard.
Well, and I think that's why we talk about like what are some tools we can use, but really if you're just using a technique to have an outcome,
Yeah.
it's not going to work because
No.
it has to be genuine and authentic. You have to feel calm. You have to be connected.
Yep.
I mean, that's why there's so much of that in our work. Um,
Yes, indeed. Because you
but
can't be calm.
you just can't.
Yeah, you
You
just
can't.
can't.
Boy, have I tried to, and most of us have.
Yeah.
I'm fine, honey. Now let's get in the car.
Right,
All
right, right,
right. And they're like, oh my gosh, mom.
right.
So we talked a little bit about things that got in the way, how like it
Yeah.
wasn't modeled for us. Um, and then sometimes life stressors get in the way, and sometimes our expectations get in the way. So if I
Definitely.
expect, my 2-year-old to be like all the other 2-year-olds who can use their words and pour
Yes.
their own juice and get themselves dressed, we're going to be really frustrated.
Yes. Yeah, actually, a couple of years ago, 0 to 3 did an extensive parent survey, and they found that there is a really, they call it the expectation gap, that for parents of toddlers and preschoolers, there is a mismatch between what the general parent thinks a child of that age can do as far as self regulation and impulse control and following directions. And what they're actually neurologically capable of doing. There's
Yeah.
a really big disconnect. And so, which, if you've worked with parents for any period of time, you probably have already seen that. And if you are a parent, you've probably seen like that your expectation of what your child should be able to do, if they consistently aren't meeting your expectation, it's kind of our job to shift it and to meet them where
Yes.
they are and then support them and offering skills and support and that emotionally regulated brain that helps them build skills. Then you can see some really stunning growth, because that's the other thing, is that they do grow in amazing and profound ways, but it's often not a straight line. It's
Yeah.
often not like walking up a ladder. It's often looks like a crazy zigzag back and forth, because that's just how we learn. And we kind of get ready to take those big developmental leaps, and it might look like regression, but then there's a springing forward. So
Yes.
if you know that, that's why it's so important for parents to know about child development. We don't live in a village anymore. We don't live places where we've seen sisters and aunts and mothers, raise babies and babies and babies. A lot of us, the first time we hold a baby, it's our own baby, and we haven't had that, you know, understanding and knowledge about how children grow passed on to us. And we have
Mhm.
the internet, but the internet's so overwhelming, and there's so much,
So much
too much
information.
information, right? So it's kind of like I want people to learn enough so that they have realistic expectations, but not so much that they become so completely overwhelmed by, what to expect or,
Right.
what's out there. It can be tricky,
Right. We hear a lot about we have to have high expectations, you
right?
know. And so when
Yes.
I see parents, I'm like, well, actually, we have to get our expectations in line with who our children is individually. So, like, we talk about brain development so much, and the thinking brain, the up this part up here, you probably know the word for it,
Yeah. The
isn't really,
prefrontal cortex.
yes, the
Yeah.
prefrontal cortex is not really fully developed until mid to late 20s. So, like, maybe yours was fully developed at 25, and mine probably wasn't fully developed until I was like 29 and a half. So,
Yeah.
like, that could be 4 years difference. And that's
Yep.
what happens with our children, too. So, like, can your 2-year-old use the potty? Maybe. Maybe
Sure.
they won't use it till they're 4, or maybe they learned when they were 18 months, and all that is normal. We
Right.
have to meet that child where that child is.
Right. Well, it can be a real source of anxiety if people are, it used to be you only comparing yourself to the people in your neighborhood or community or play group or whatever, but now you have, people all over the country, maybe in your Facebook feed, who are posting about how their child is, using the toilet at a much younger age. There's lots of ways for parents to feel anxious and stressed. And
Yes.
that is unfortunately sort of the antithesis or in direct opposition to being able to be a great model and a confident, calm leader, which I know we all want to be. And so figuring out how how much outside, info to let in. I love Brene Brown. She says the people whose opinion you care about, their name should fit on a small Post-it note.
I love that
Like,
too.
and the rest, and like stand, it's not good to be, an island unto yourself and not receive any feedback, but the people from whom you care about their opinion and feedback should be a pretty darn short list. It shouldn't be all 600 of your Facebook friends. Like that would drive you insane. There's
Yes.
just no way. Or comparing yourself to different people. Everybody's different, and meeting children where they are. I mean, there's so much out there right now. I just read another article about parenting style today, and there was so many new terms on there. I can't even keep up. There's like tiger and helicopter and snowplow and elephant and unicorn, and like, I mean, it's getting a little crazy. But this was through my work at 0 to 3, and I was like, yeah, why don't you go ahead and share this on social media? But then, put our article about responsive care. Like that sort of sums it all up for me. Like, pick whatever style works for you. But what's really, really important, especially for babies and toddlers, is that we be responsive to who they are in the moment, where they are, and meet their needs, and offer them guidance and support.
Right.
And the high expectations always have to come with high support. Like that's the piece, I'm not against having expectations of children and helping them be at their learning edge. Like I know it's good for me to be at my learning edge and to have maybe those people on my Post-it note who are keeping me honest.
Yes.
But that has to come with high support too, because if it doesn't, kids will flail and they won't build that resilience.
Right.
That is what we want them to learn from having high expectations.
Right. Well, and even there's that fine line between I'm being pushed and I'm frustrated, right? And when you get to this point, when you're so frustrated, there's no more learning going on.
Right. You're out of the learning zone. Yeah. There's like a little chart for that. I can't remember who created that, but there's like the learning zone is like a tiny bit of stress,
Right.
Like stress can be a motivator and something that pushes us in a good way, but it does easily we cross out of our window of tolerance into like, forget it. I'm overwhelmed.
Yes.
I can't do it.
I'm just giving up.
Right. And so watching for that and figuring out how to support your kids through that, because that's going to be a normal process where you go too far and need to kind of come back and
Yeah. And it's really just about staying attuned. Like, okay, oh, things are good. Oh, wait, they've crossed that. I'm going to back up just a little bit. Let's see what they need.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about how brains work? Have we talked enough about it?
I don't know. I can't. I love talking about brains. It is really helpful. It was helpful for me to know that brains get built from the bottom up, like a house, that's how they get constructed, and that the more primitive parts of the brain come the most wired, which isn't surprising. And one of the things I thought was cool about how brains develop is knowing the why. Like, why aren't babies pre-wired for language? Well, that's because they could be born anywhere and they could need to learn any language and they could need to learn any cultural customs. And like the fact that brains develop as they are engaged with through that responsive caregiving, through that, they call it the serve and return process, where you meet a child's need and then they become attuned to you and that grows their brain in a certain way. I just think that is so cool that's why, because we need to be so adaptive, is why our brains are wired after we get here.
Right.
And just ending the nurture nature debate and knowing that it's both, I think is so cool, that we do have predispositions and genetic footprints, but that how those genes get expressed is dependent on the kind of environment and care that we grow up in and receive when we're little, which can be a mixed blessing for those of us who maybe had chaotic childhoods or, had adversity in childhood. But the good news is that our brains continue to be able to be shaped and molded and are neuroplastic. They have neuroplasticity, which
Right.
means that even if we are conditioned to respond in certain ways, that we can, through all kinds of different modalities, therapy, mindfulness, meditation, there's lots of cool somatic ways of helping people integrate the ways that their brains were wired and to build new pathways,
Right.
which is really cool. And that's what I feel like I'm doing when I stop in the middle of getting heated and say, "Oh, I don't know what to do right now," because I'm not following that well-worn path in my brain that is going to lead me to yelling or threatening or bribing or, when my kid was little, just picking him up and putting him in his car seat,
Yes.
say like, well, no, I said I wasn't going to do that. I know that's a tactic that's going to expire as soon as he's too big. So I'm going to go with the relationship based thing, even though I don't know exactly what that is right now. Like
Right.
that slowly wired my brain to being able to stay calm in the face of something that used to totally freak me out. Right?
Right.
Like it used to totally freak me out when my toddler would scream for more than 20 minutes. I just was like, how can this be? How can this be a thing I'm supposed to endure? And
Yeah.
like, it was untenable to me that listening to crying and tolerating it for more than 20 minutes was even a possibility. Like my brain would just explode and I would
Yeah.
panic and lose my mind. And it was not pretty. Um,
It is dysregulating for
it's so
to sit with
dysregulating,
that.
but I had to learn new skills. And then once I did, I was like, oh, I can see how this will, how just keeping my chill and there's not an emergency, like reminding myself it's not an emergency if my child is crying. He's safe. He's not injured. Like, he must just need to cry. I was arguing with reality.
Right.
Byron
I'm right,
Katie.
right. I'm
Yeah,
right here. I'm present.
yeah,
I
exactly. And
can't
that there was
fix it.
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Um, I love Byron Katie has a quote that says, when I argue with reality, I lose 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And I find myself arguing with reality on a regular basis. And
Yes.
so I have to like rein myself in and be like, this is not helpful to me. But that's just how my brain got wired. If
Right.
I didn't like the way things were going, I would, you know, go into denial or pretend they weren't happening or,
Right.
all kinds of things like that. And so, nope, I'm going to be, the reality is my kid is still crying. And the very first time, this is a hand-in-hand parenting tool called Stay Listening. I know you have other
Yeah.
folks on here who are hand-in-hand instructors talking about it, but the first time I was like, I'm gonna just relax my body and just sit with this and be with it and hold space. And he cried for almost an hour
Wow.
and had just had like a full-on tantrum for almost an hour. He's about 2.5, 3, and then he literally never had a tantrum that long ever again.
Wow.
Like I just decided to trust the process, and then my analysis at the end was like, apparently he just needed to let that out. And I could see where every other time where I would swoop in after 20 minutes and stop, like enforce my will
Yeah.
of like, I've had enough, I cannot listen to this anymore, he kept not getting to the bottom of it.
Right. It
Right.
still kept trickling out.
And so then it was and his demeanor just smoothed right out after that. Like everything got easier after we got through that one big emotional hurdle, which who knows what it was about. Like partly I kept wondering why, and I wanted, the rational part of my mind wanted to know why. I probably, so I could like fix and control and contain it, I'm guessing. Just a guess. And so when I just decided not to do that, an experiment, I just tried it as an experiment. It was really profound. And I feel like that wired my brain in a better direction. I feel like it wired his brain in a better direction because what fires together wires together. So when
Right.
I have big feelings and they're not suppressed, that wires my brain in a certain direction. And the
Yeah.
same goes for the little people that we are
Right.
influencing and raising.
I love it. There were two things that I hope my brain will be able to speak to. The first thing that you said that you talked about, and it's something I try to remind parents, that it can feel really hard and frustrating at first when you're trying to do something different.
Yeah.
But as Sarah said, the more we interrupt what we usually do, even if it's just to go, I don't know what to do, that interruption process really does begin to rewire our brain. It
Yeah.
becomes less overwhelming, less difficult, less foreign, and more Okay, I can do this. Okay, I can figure out what's next.
Yeah.
And so we really are rewiring our brain. And then the other thing that I heard Sarah say that I wanted to repeat was that you might not always be in the emotional state to listen for an hour to your child.
No.
And you have to pay attention. It's important that you know, because if you try to listen and then you get dysregulated and angry and you lash out and you hit or you yell or whatever, it's better to be ready and prepared and to get into that space and go, I'm going to relax. I love how you said it too, Sarah. I could see it and feel it myself. I'm going to relax into my body and I'm just going to be here.
Yep.
I'm just going to do it. And I'm going to see what happens.
Yeah.
Right?
No, that's a really important point that you make, is that you have those physical sensations of whether or not you actually are escalated, heated, triggered, pick whatever word works for you. That is a cue that you don't have the bandwidth or capacity to keep listening in a meaningful way, because gritting your teeth and just like trying to clench your fists and white knuckle your way through
Yes.
a child being upset, it does not hold the same kind of therapeutic space for them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it would be like if as an adult I was in therapy and my therapist was like,
Yes, it would be exactly like that, actually.
like that's not therapeutic.
It's
Like I would not pay for
dysregulating.
that. I
Yeah.
would not. And it's not helpful to my child if I'm gritting my teeth and he's upset. Like if I'm not able to offer true compassion, it's better that I wrap it up. It is better that I say, okay, I can't listen anymore. I've run out of steam. I've run out of rope or whatever.
Right.
But for me, it was just knowing that it was possible and that I could try it and see. And it definitely is a learning curve. Like you were saying, it definitely is something that the more you do it, your brain becomes more able to, those pathways then get wired of being able to stay calm and not get triggered in those moments. But it does take time.
It does.
And it's not like it ever goes away. I mean, it's still certainly, my buttons still get pushed. For sure.
Yes, forever. I'm so covered in buttons. Just no matter who's around, fall into
on every inch, right?
Yes. Who wants to fall into my button right now?
Darn it. Yeah. We talk about that. And now my son, he's almost 10, and he'll say like, you really push my buttons, and he can use that language, or say that he got triggered and that he was upset because he's seen other people get triggered, get upset, manage it, talk about it, say, and owning it. Like, I don't even know where I got this concept, but the fact that other people can't make you feel a certain way, that our feelings are ours, that's really where our power lies to make changes around how reactive we are. Because it's common in our vernacular to be like, he made me feel, or that made me feel. And I'm always like, no, nobody makes you feel. I mean, we have our buttons that are installed in child, early in life, and that our children then further install. But those are still my feelings. When I lose my temper and my ability to temper myself, and I have a big, strong feeling, that belongs to me. I need to own that. And that creates a whole different vibe in your relationships in general, right? To be accountable and responsible for your feelings, but also be able to acknowledge to other people where they're pushing your buttons and that's what a good relationship is, trying to work with that, trying to navigate that, because that's just being a human, right?
Yes. And it's a practice. And I don't know where I learned it either, but I remember thinking, emotions come up. I can't help whatever emotion comes up, whether my daughter falls into one of the buttons that are sitting on my shoulder or whatever, but it's not my fault that the emotions come up. They're meant to guide me, but it's my responsibility to own and deal with my emotions and not blame her or Sarah or whoever else, the person who knocks on the door during the webinar, right?
Well, there's no power in that. Like that helps me want to be responsible for my own feelings, because then I have power and I have capacity to do something about it. It's interesting. I thought of when you were saying that, I have this funny trigger, which maybe other people relate to. I don't know. I haven't really explored it, but I get really triggered when my kid gets hurt.
Oh, yeah.
It's not about behavior, but it's like I get this like wave of anxiety, but it always has like anger and rage, in it, which feels terrible because I end up feeling like really mad if he gets hurt, which is like like getting hurt is part of life.
Right.
Like the scrapes, he's got a scooter, like
Right.
there's climbing, there's twisting ankles. I mean, like that's life. And I'm still working with that one, but I get like, oh, why do you keep getting hurt, or why are you sick, or like
Right.
I feel burdened by that,
Right.
in kind of a funny way that I get to explore and I get to look at and work on.
I've had that experience, and I think for me, in that experience, that when I feel angry when my kid gets hurt, or like I want to blame her, like, why didn't you look where you were going,
Right, right,
right?
right.
Is this, I, I think what it is for me is this underlying sense of helplessness to prevent her from being
Yeah,
hurt,
yeah, yeah.
right?
That's definitely part of it.
Oh, and I just think, oh, I don't want you to get hurt by
I
people
know.
or rocks that are in your way or
Or anything.
anything.
I know.
And
I
then I think,
know.
oh man, all the fun I would have missed out on if I were
I
worried about
know.
being hurt.
I know, right? It's so true. And then that was another big lesson from seeing my son through an hour-long tantrum is that that sent a clear and very strong message to him that I trusted and believed in his ability to process that pain. Whatever that pain and upset and rage and whatever it was that he was working through, that I that it wasn't it, I was able to be unflustered about it. And that sends like, and I think about the impact that might have had on me if somebody was able to provide that kind of space, and I
Yeah,
go, oh, I get it. Like that is so impactful to be like, no, you're cry all you want, I'm right here to support you, it's
yeah,
okay. Like that will, you can do that. That's what humans
yeah,
are built. We're built for that. We're built to withstand that and come through the other side of it. But you got to go through it, right? The only
yeah,
way out is through. And so I had really been inadvertently kind of sticking a stick in his spokes, as he
yeah,
was trying to get through it. I was curtailing that process. And
right.
so being able to reframe it and see it as that children are built to overcome their disappointments and process their emotional pain. And they're actually quite good at it. They're better at it than we are. And that's one of the
Yes,
things I wanted to talk about with you today is that we they know exactly what to do to feel better, but we are like, this is so inconvenient or loud or messy, or we're at the grocery store or
yeah,
whatever it is. And instead, like sometimes you have to move it along. Like I get it, it's life. And also in order to be able to like respond in those moments, we have to be taking really good care of ourselves,
yeah,
right? Like we have to be
yeah,
meeting our emotional needs and having good boundaries with our other family members and our children. Like that is the other piece that's so important, is being able to check in and be like, am I able to do this right now? Is this,
right.
can I listen right now? Or is this something we should table? And, with a young, unreasonable 2-year-old, you don't maybe have quite so many choices. Even more important that you take really impeccable, excellent care of yourself, because sometimes you just gotta stop, drop, and roll with a 2-year-old.
Right.
There's my son's almost 10. I can negotiate with him a little bit more around having difficult conversations
Right.
that was not possible even a few years ago.
Right. Hey, I really want to talk about this. Can we do it in an hour? And your
Yes.
two-year-old's going to be like, no.
Right. Or like, this is not, like we're at the end of a 6-hour road trip. It's not the time to negotiate new screen time rules. Like, I just
Right.
don't have it in me right now. Can we
Yes.
table it till later this week? And he'll be like, yeah, oh, of course, mom. Cause it's
Yeah.
kind of like, this is not going to go well for anybody if we
Yeah.
try to do this right
Yeah.
now.
Well, your thinking brain's way online more than mine at the end of a 6-hour drive. I'm like, if you need an answer now, the answer's no. But if
Oh,
you
I've
can
said that
wait,
before too.
yeah, if you can
You want
wait
me
till
to answer now? The
tomorrow,
answer's
the
no.
answer's maybe. But
Yeah.
I gotta think. Okay, Mom.
Yes.
Yes, you can have till tomorrow.
I'm gonna need to do some research. That's one of my ones.
I need to do, oh yeah, I do that too.
I'm gonna need to do some research on that. We'll have to talk about it later.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Those
boundaries
phrases are
goes.
helpful.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, having those go to and knowing that it's sometimes it gets confusing as somebody who like this wasn't modeled for us, right? Like,
Yes.
and we're the first generation to benefit from knowledge gained from the fMRI machine. Like that's just the reality of science, right? Like,
Right.
and so I love that that kind of takes the sting out of that intergenerational pain, because
Yes.
now we can, as Maya Angelou says, know better, do better.
Yes.
Whereas people just like, it really takes the blame out of the fact that my parents didn't behave this way and parent this way. They just literally did not have this information. There's just
Right.
no way that it could have happened. And it's kind of a double-edged sword. It could be considered a bit of a burden to be the ones to benefit from this information, because it's
Yeah.
a ton of work and processing, and rewiring your brain is not something that happens overnight. But I also think about how cool it is that
Yeah.
we get to practice this, and we get to demonstrate it. And even if we fumble,
Yeah.
I think that that is still pretty cool and
It is.
beneficial to our children.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge learning curve. We absolutely will fumble. You
Yes,
know,
that's just part of it. And it's very humbling. That's why, my son gives me
so
lots of
humbling.
opportunities to take my own advice.
Yes.
Because I wrote, and I'll confess, I wrote the majority of my very short book before he was born,
Yeah.
and it was published when he was 2, and I had the opportunity to do some revising. And part of me was tempted to be like, oh man, this is a really high bar that I have set. Like, this is really hard. Should I leave this in here? And then the other part of me was like, yes, this is, it's okay. It's okay to fumble and fall down and scrape my knee while I'm trying to do this. That's going to be part of it. I really still do strongly believe that it's possible to raise kids without punishment and threats and bribes
Well,
and
that's setting the
spanking.
high expectations and then
Yes.
supporting ourselves as we get
Yes.
there, right?
Which is, again, awesome modeling.
Yes. It
Everything
is.
is awesome modeling. And I think it's also okay to admit when you're wrong. Like, that's other great modeling is like, I messed that up. I'm sorry I yelled. I didn't want to behave that way, in that
Yeah.
moment. And I'm learning too. And I have, I'm at this point, I've told my son, like, my mom and dad didn't have this information. So,
Yeah.
I got parented a really different way. And that sometimes makes things, less smooth for me as a
Yeah.
parent.
Yes. Oh, I've said the same. My daughter
Yeah.
knows the same.
Yeah.
She wants to know more details. And I'm like, well, they just were doing the best they could.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
So,
Yep.
what are some other things we can do when we feel like we just can't pull it off and we lose our cool?
Yeah. So, it's the cycle of rupture and repair. I can't cite my source for that. I don't know where that came from, but
I was trying to remember
what
too.
is that from? Center
They
for the
talk about
Developing Child?
they they talk about it in the still face
Yep.
um,
Experiment.
research experiment. Oh, I don't know. My brain won't.
And that is from the Center for the Developing Child at Harvard University, where they conducted that experiment.
Mhm.
I don't know if we have access to that or not,
Oh yeah,
but
talked about that.
I like to think about, like, the fact that, I mean, we have this sort of, because of the way many of us were parented, this kind of funny ideal that the parents are sort of omnipotent and all knowing, all seeing, and don't make any mistakes, and always know the right way to do things. And that's just not true, and so I think that there's a fine line of being able to be confident, but also confident in the fact that you're not going to get it right all the time, and it's okay to apologize. Like, I do think it's important for kids that parents are in a leadership role. Let's say, like, Gordon Newfield would say that they are alpha in the relationship. That doesn't mean that they're controlling, but I think that's an important distinction to make, that parents should be in charge. That allows children to relax and rest into the care that they receive from said parents. And so
Right.
it's different to be like, oh, I really messed that up and I want to apologize to you and I'm going to try to do things differently next time. Has a totally different tone and vibe than like, oh, I just don't know what I'm doing. And this parenting thing is so hard. And, oh, you just
Yeah.
have to forgive me. Like, oh, like that, those are two different ways to apologize for making a mistake. Right. And so I think that our nonverbal language and our way of being and carrying ourselves is worth noting, because that makes a huge difference, right? Like
Yeah.
those are in stark contrast to each other. And you can imagine that the impact they would have on a child, like the latter is sort of just like, wait, what's going on? I thought you're supposed to be driving this train,
Yeah.
right? Like that can cause a lot of anxiety for children where they don't feel like the grown-up is in charge or knows what they're doing. So it can be, again, I hate to have fine lines because feels hard to discern, but being able to be confident but accountable, just, like you would in any other relationship, right?
Exactly. Yes.
And that there is rupture and repair in any relationship. Nobody gets it perfect all the time. We do step in each other's muck or push each other's buttons, and that's okay. That's how we learn and grow.
And we all have these sticky places where we go, oh, look, there's something I need to work on.
Exactly.
Our children will tell us too when they're feeling like they need us to pull things in a little more. So for my daughter, late last year, she was having a hard time at breakfast, which was a new thing for us, and for breakfast specifically. And I just was like, I think she actually just is tired of making decisions. I'm going to stop asking her what she wants for breakfast. I already know what she likes.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to, so I started with, do you want something hot or cold for breakfast? And then she would just say, I want something cold. And so I'd make her a smoothie or yogurt and fruit or whatever, and just like really noticing when something shifts for our children and saying, okay, what's going on? They need me to take some of this stress away. And for her, it was stress. It was decision. I need to make fewer decisions. I'm going through some developmental shift. I didn't know what it was. I just took my best guess. And
well, sometimes it's too much and sometimes it's too little. And this is where, unfortunately, no hard and fast rules or tricks or tactics or, any of that is very effective. There's no easy answer to any problem because it's so individual, and, just getting in the present moment and seeing and taking a guess. I mean, it's a lovely story in that it could have caused more problems, and then you would have been like, oh, well, that's not it.
Maybe she needs more choices.
Right, exactly.
Just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, being responsive and experimenting. Like, it's okay to try something. Oh, we were trying something new. And it didn't work out. Okay, good to know. We'll try something else now.
Yeah.
And again, learning how much my nonverbal communication was impacting. I looked up the studies it's like 40 something years old, that 93% of communication is nonverbal.
I believe it.
And I was totally floored, but I've used that so much in my work because I just had no idea, and I just wasn't really paying attention to it.
Right.
But it is so potent. Our body language, and part of that is tone, and cadence, is also considered nonverbal. But that helps me. Like, I had a really bad habit of when I was talking to anybody and I was excited that I would get, or anxious, because they kind of were similar. My speech pattern would get like really high and really fast, and I would talk blah, 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 and I would just lose people. Like, I would lose people in professional settings where I really wanted their attention. I would lose kids when I was trying to, get a group of them, because I used to teach. I used to work in a toddler room. You're trying to navigate, a bunch of toddlers out to the playground, and my nonverbal language was not grounding people and not building connection. So. All of those things were really helpful for me to know and learn about and be able to be mindful of, recognizing that my facial expression was having an impact on other people that was largely unconscious,
Right.
That was something to then be mindful of, I know it's a cliche word, but, when you decide to pay attention to something so that you can know more about yourself and be able to be more empowered to make changes, that's mindfulness.
Right.
It's not complicated. It's one of those things it's easy but not simple, or simple but not easy. That's it. Simple but not easy. Yeah.
Yes. it's that whole pause. Wait, I'm going to stop. I don't know what to do. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, my voice, my body language, my facial expression.
Right. And not conveying stress while you're doing that. Like for me, I still lose myself on that where I'm like, oh, I'm stressed right now and I know it's showing. Like,
Yes.
so then being able to say, oh, I can tell that I'm stressed. So I'm going to take a couple of deep breaths. Like, oh, that's awesome. I hope my kid learns that because that's a really good life skill to have.
Yeah. Right. We want to talk about the still face video or show it? It's like 2.5 minutes. Or do we want to do something else? What are your thoughts?
I would love to show it. I show it a lot and I feel like it's so powerful.
I think so
And then
too.
we can talk about it for just like the last 5 minutes because it has a lot of I sort of did a good lead in there with some of the stuff I've been talking about.
Yes.
So
Okay. Let me see if I can pull it up. You tell me how it looks. Oops, where is it? Didn't show up. Okay, let me try again. Is that showing?
I still see you.
Okay. All right, screen share.
Well, I can, while you're looking for it, I'll just say briefly about it. It sort of goes along with being mindful and being responsive, which we've talked about a lot, is staying present, which is so much harder than it sounds. Um, Especially when I had a lot of experience with other people's children before I had my own. So I kind of was a little overconfident in how well parenting was going to go people would say that to me. They were like, oh, you're going to be like the best parent. You already know everything about kids. And so I was kind of like, yeah, I do. This is going to be a piece of cake. And then raising your own child is so much different. It's such a
Oh,
totally
yes.
different experience than working with other people's kids. And I even worked with a family as a nanny for almost 4 years, where I was intimately involved in the daily care of 2 small children. Still completely different. Like the way that you are emotionally in when you are raising your own child is so completely different than when you are helping raise someone else's. Like that's
Yes.
all the best way that I can put it. And what I was shocked at how less easy, how much harder. Oh, there we go.
Okay, it's okay.
Started screen sharing.
Okay.
Perfect. Just about how hard it is to stay in the present moment, but we can circle back to that.
I had the same experience. Okay, is that showing all the way?
Yeah, no, I can see it.
All
Now
right.
you just need volume, maybe.
Was that playing?
Yep.
Okay.
It's a little quiet.
This is
There you
something
go. Perfect.
studying 30, 40 years ago when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In this still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I need my girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, come on, why aren't we doing this? Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Mm.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
I've seen that like 100 times, and it still like chokes me up every time.
Me too. Me too.
It's so hard to watch.
I was doing math in my head. I was like, I'm not.
Tear up. I'm going to do math. I'm not going to tear up.
Oh my gosh, can you even imagine what that mom went through in doing that? Like, she is just, I mean, and there's lots of different videos of different mother-child pairs that they did this experiment with. That I like that clip, but some of the clips show mothers and babies that aren't so attuned when they're not in the experiment. And, you know, they did do a lot of research. And for me, that just drove home how much our emotional relationship and our nonverbal communication, like how much how much our children are dialed into. I mean, it never ceases to shock me how quickly that baby is like, whoa. Like, it's literally like 1 second. It's 1.5 seconds maybe where she just goes, whoa, what is happening? This is totally not normal. It takes her 1 second to figure that out. Yes. And I think about days when I'm not at my best emotionally. Like, I remember a family that I nannied for, and this kid's behavior was just off the wall. And I realized I had a headache all day, and I probably looked like this all day long. Like,
right.
And because I was like, why? The day I have a headache is his behavior so rotten. And then I was like, oh, of course, because he usually sees this when I come to work. And today he saw, whoa, because I didn't feel well. And so, of course, then you can see how that could spiral, where if I wasn't aware of that and I wasn't cued into how my nonverbal cues might be affecting a small growing person, that it might be harder to repair, right?
Yes.
If you don't know, then it makes it harder to kind of come back and make that reconnection.
Right. It's amazing just how tuned in they really are.
Yeah.
All the time. And so when we get on the phone and suddenly they want our attention, or we get on our phone and suddenly they want our attention.
Of course. Yes, indeed.
It just shows right up, right? Yep. And then it can be hard. Usually if I'm getting on my phone, I can use it as a distraction. And I know a lot of people feel the same. Like, I just need a break, right? And so I get on my phone and I go, okay, that means I need that self-care. So I need something I'm not getting. How do I attune to myself so that I can attune to my child?
Yeah.
And it's hard.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, your own oxygen mask first, right? Like, it's easy to get pulled in so many different directions of things that need and want our attention.
Yes. Any last minute words of wisdom about how we can stay present?
Yeah. Feeling into your body, like for me, just being aware of body sensations. And if I start to feel like I am, launched into the past and how maybe I was parented, or worried about the future and how my child's going to turn out, and I catch myself and I just like take a deep breath. Breathing is the one system in our bodies that is both autonomic and whatever the opposite of autonomic is. You can't take control of how your blood flows through your body or how your neurons are firing, but you can take control of how you're breathing, which is something, if you're not paying attention to it, it will do it on its own. So it's the only place where you really have an in to your physiological self in that way. And so, again, it seems cliche, but pausing and taking a handful of deep breaths. So there's lots of different kinds of yogic breathing practices that you could that you could learn. You know, Brene Brown, again, has a really funny story in one of her books about tactical breathing, and the irony of how, like, basically no matter who you ask, the answer is breathing. Like
Right.
that's the way to come back to yourself. If you're asking a yoga teacher or an army captain, the answer is breathing. That's how we come back to the present moment.
Yes. And we
So
always have our breath with
we
us.
always
We don't have to
always
pack
have
it.
it.
Yeah.
Nope, exactly. And there's no other trick other than just remembering can take a deep breath and pause right now. That there's a lot of power in that, and there's a lot of opportunity in that. And again, simple but not easy, and just practice and being really gentle with yourself.
Yes.
You know, when you don't get it right, and having that, offering that same compassion to yourself that you and love to yourself that you would offer to your children.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad you were here. It was really nice just to chat with you and
It was
hear
fun.
information. If people want to read more or learn more
Yeah,
about you, where can they
I
find you?
have a very neglected blog over at sarahmaclaughlin.com. It's Sarah with an H and McLaughlin, MAC. But, you know, every once in a while, I am inspired to put something up there. I have a handful of articles up on Huffington Post you can access through my website as well. But yeah, everything you would need to know about me is there.
Awesome. So thank you for being here and joining us today. It was just really nice to be in community together. There will be a recording later, and I will send it out as soon as I am able to.